Alright guys, welcome to the second and final video for this week. I don't know if you guys can hear the train in the background. We got a big freight train going through. Back in the park. I like it here. Maybe I'll keep doing my videos from here. I don't know. It's kind of pretty. There's a lot going. There's not a lot of people, which is kind of weird because I don't know. People coming out, walking, getting out of their house. Seems to be a lot of people on the sidewalks. Have you guys noticed that? A lot of people walking their dogs, walking with each other. There are people in this park. There's that train again. I'm easily distracted. Can you tell? You should know that by now. Let's listen. Okay, now it stops. All right, whatever. Today I'm going to do kind of what I call it's called a Think-Aloud. I'm going to read that article that we're working on for you guys. I'm going to read it, and I'm going to do what's called, like I said, a Think-Aloud, which is I'm going to stop at certain parts of the article and just kind of think out loud. Like, what would I be thinking as a teacher or someone who's critically reading the article, right? What are some of the things that I'd be reading? So it might be a little awkward because I'm sort of here with the camera and I'm trying to read at the same time as you're looking at me, and it's not like in class, but we can at least get this done. All right, it'll take a few minutes because, like I said, I'm going to actually read through the article and actually have you guys, the article right here, and actually have you guys listen to how I would think out loud. So let me go ahead and start. It's kind of bright out here. I can kind of read it, and I'll do sort of the think aloud. Right. Happy New Year. We seldom think of those words as an order, but in some respects, that is what they are. Think about that. Happy New Year. Ever think about saying that to somebody? It's like, have a Happy New Year. You should have one. We're kind of ordering somebody to do it, right? It's like, you should have a Happy New Year, right? I want you to have a Happy New Year. Do it. Do it. Do it. That's really what that means. It's an order. It's an imperative, what we call an imperative, which is we're telling somebody to do something, an imperative, like pick up the trash, do your homework, have a Happy New Year. Second paragraph. Doesn't every American want to be happy? And don't most Americans yearn deep down to be happy all the time? The right laid out in our nation's Declaration of Independence to pursue happiness in our hearts to our heart's content is nowhere on better display than in the rites of the holiday season. With glad tidings and good cheer, we seek to bring one year to its natural happy conclusion while preparing to usher in a happy new year and many happy returns. All right. So again, the author is assuming that, yes, we all want to be happy. We all want to have that happy new year. And this is kind of a little bit different than, I tell you guys to write your essays. I say, please don't start with a question. Please don't question, the reader. Sometimes we can break these rules. Okay. And he does it here. He asks the question, right, about us being happy. Do we want to be happy? He kind of, he says, doesn't every American want to be happy? The question is yes, right? The answer is yes. And he's assuming that we're all going to answer yes. And honestly, with that kind of question, I'm not sure who's going to say they don't want to be happy. You ask somebody, do you want to have $1 million? There are people that are going to say no. They're going to say that money is corruptive and they don't want to have that much money. But something like happiness, I think we all want to be happy in our own way. And so that's what he's asking us. Right? Do we want to be happy? And he's assuming we're going to say yes. So as an author, that's where he's putting us. He's putting us in that position to say yes. And again, he says, to our heart's content. Have you guys ever heard that before? To our heart's content. I want you to be happy to your heart's content. That means until your heart is filled with the happiness and is done being happy, till it's content, till its end, till the happiness is, that's it. You can have no more happiness because you're so happy. And that's what that means. So that's very specific. It's not just happiness, but it's happy to our heart's content until we can no longer be happy anymore because we're so happy, because life's so great. There's no more to it, and we're just going to sit in this happiness forever. All right, let's go on to the next And the question, what I think when I think about this, it's like to our heart's content. And then we think about the title, In Pursuit of Happiness. Maybe he wants us to actually go the other way, right? As I read this, I think maybe he wants us to look at happiness as a bad thing. Maybe there is that negative side to happiness. So as a reader, that's kind of what I'm thinking right now. It's like, okay, yes, I want to be happy. Yes. Well, maybe he's going to go somewhere else with this, right? Maybe he's going to take us on a different track. Next paragraph. If I can get this straight. Like the cycle of the seasons, our emphasis on mirth is happiness, may seem timeless. as though human beings have always made merry from beginning to end. Merry, once again, is happiness also, like mirth. But in fact, this preoccupation or this worry with perpetual happiness is relatively recent, right? So this worry about perpetual, always being happy, he's saying it's not something we've always had in human nature, in human life. It's not as long lasting as we have thought, right? As Thomas Carlyle observed in 1843, happiness, our being's end and aim, is at bottom if we will count, well, not yet 2 centuries old in the world. Let me go to the next page. This is a little awkward, I know. Awkward, and it's sticking, so I will pick that up. I'm not littering. I will get it right now. It's flying away. I'm not gonna litter. Okay. All right, back to this point. This is continue on with the essay here, the article. Carlyle's arithmetic was essentially sound, for changes in both religious and secular culture since the 17th century made happiness in the form of pleasure or good feeling not only morally acceptable, but commendable in and of itself. While many discounted religious notions that consigned life in this world to misery and sin, others discovered signs of God's providence in earthly satisfaction. So we kind of go back in the past and we think of religion that's actually telling us, old religion centuries ago, that happiness is not a good thing. We should not be happy. If you think about we haven't really talked about Puritanism and that sort of thing. That's kind of a good read is kind of following around. The Crucible is a good little play about that, but we're not looking into that so much. But I think you might have heard of it by now. But that idea that happiness is something that we deserve, he's saying that's not. Once again, it's new-ish because we've had religion say it's bad for so many centuries, so long ago. Continuing with the article. The result was at once to weaken and transpose the ideal of heavenly happiness. In effect, bringing it to earth, bringing that happiness from God to earth. We can't be happy. Suffering was not our natural state. Happy was the way we were meant to be. So we kind of have that change into happiness is okay. And that's the way we're meant to be. So that's kind of what we're looking at now. That's how we are today. And that's how he's going to kind of talk about that. That shift was monumental, and its implications far-reaching. Among other things, it was behind the transformation of the holiday season from a time of pious remembrance into one of unadulterated bliss. Pious remembrance. Pious has to do with religion. So it's the change. We go from something like Christmas, okay, that was very religious, right? And people focused on the religion. And then today, not everybody does, but everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people celebrate Christmas, and it's more for the fun and the excitement and the happiness that it brings. Maybe included in the religion. It depends who you are. But he's saying that change has been made. And that suffering is not our natural state. We're actually not just meant to suffer. Next paragraph. That shift was monumental, and excuse me, I just kind of read that. Let me go back to where it was. Yet the effects were greater than that. As Carlyle complained, every pitifulest whisper that walks within a skin and has had his head filled with the notion that he is, shall be, or by all human and divine laws ought to be happy. Right? We have a little simile here, this like, right? Like the cycle of the seasons emphasizes the idea, and so it's some commentary here. I'm not reading the article if you're kind of following along. I'm kind of reading my notes. The simile, like the cycle of the seasons, it emphasizes the idea that the pursuit of happiness, looking for happiness, has actually been going on forever, right? The word preoccupation, that means to worry, right? It means that we have a distraction. We're distracted by something. Like trying to be happy distracts from living life, right? Sometimes people say we're not really living life, we're just focusing on trying to be happy, and that doesn't make us happy, right? What else did I have in my notes? signs of God. So this is a little quote. So this happens to be signs of God's providence and earthly satisfaction. What does that mean? That kind of brings to mind the idea that we're closer to God if we're happy, right? So some of those ideas that are out there is actually, instead of being in a state of suffering all the time, actually the happiness can make us closer to God. So that's another kind of ideological shift, or shift in mindset that has happened. We also have the word monumental, which means huge, right? That it's a huge shift that's been happening to make us, in terms of wanting to be happy. And then that term, unadulterated bliss, that just means happiness to no end, no matter what you do to make want to do to make you happy, right? So it's that change of unadulterated bliss. Excuse me. All right. Let me continue the article here. Carlyle was notoriously cranky. Kind of like me, a little cranky. Not always. Carlyle was notoriously cranky, but a central insight that the new doctrine of happiness tended to raise expectations that could never possibly be fulfilled remains as relevant today as it was in 1843. Despite enjoying far better living standards and more avenues for pleasure than before, human beings are arguably no happier now than they've ever been. That's an interesting thought, right? That no happier now than we've ever been, even though we've strived for this happiness, right? Is what he's saying. Sociologist. That next paragraph starts with sociologist. And please, I hope you guys remember the word sociologist, because we talked about that when we talk about the Society of Leopard Man, right? Sociology of Leopard Man, right? So people who study society and being. So sociologists, here we go. Next paragraph. Sociologists like to point out that the percentage of those describing themselves as happy or very happy has remained virtually unchanged in Europe and the United States since such surveys were first conducted in the 1950s. And yet this January, like last year and the next, the self-help industry will put forth books promising to make us happier than we are today. The very demand for such books is a strong indication that they aren't working. So once again, sociologists studying society, studying how we are, how we live, what we feel like, what we're happy or not happy about. They're saying that our happiness levels haven't changed in, what would that be, the 50s? So that'd be 50, 60, 70 years. Think about all the technological advances that we have, from television to the internet to streaming movies, to the different types of cars we drive than in the 50s. So our lives, they seem better. Our lives seem better. It seems like we should have far happier lives based on the stuff that's around us. But the records show that we're not necessarily happier today as we were in the 50s. And that's kind of an interesting thought. Moving on to the next paragraph, in the wind. Let me fold the paper. Should this be a cause for concern? He's asking about that. Now that we're not as happy as we were, should this be a cause for concern? Should we worry? Some critics say it is. For example, economics like Lord Richard Leonard and Daniel Kahneman have argued that the apparent stagnancy of happiness in modern societies should prompt policymakers to shift their priorities from the creation of wealth to the creation of good feelings, from boosting gross national product to increasing gross national happiness. So economists thinking about the economy, thinking about money, and there's a lot of crazy stuff happening with the economy right now, for sure. But he's saying that maybe countries should not worry about how much money people are making in their country, and saying, hey, look at our country. We're making a lot of money. Our people are making a lot of money. Our businesses are making a lot of money. Because that's kind of how we reflect a good economy or a good country right now, is the economy doing well? But this economics is saying, you know what? Maybe we should focus on the happiness of the people, not the money of the people. Maybe that should show us what makes a great country. What makes a country a wonderful place to live in is the happiness of the people and not the money of the people. So that's a kind of an interesting thought. Next page. It's going to stick together again. This little awkward silence. Okay, we're getting there. All right, here we go. Back to the article. But before we take excuse me. Whew. You know how I be. Kind of mumble my words sometimes. But before we take such steps, in other words, before we start just looking at happiness and not the economy, but before we take such steps, we might do well to reflect on the darker side of holiday cheer. Those mysterious blues that are apt to set in while the streamers stream and the corks pop. The little voice that even the best of souls is sometimes moved to say, bah humbug. As Carlyle put it, the prophets preach to us, thou shalt be happy, thou shalt love pleasant things. But as we well know, the very commandment tended to undermine its fulfillment, even to make us sad. So sometimes people do get sad during the holidays. That's kind of the point. Sometimes maybe you do. Sometimes I do. It's weird. It's kind of one of those things. It should be happy time. But there are some people that kind of feel the sadness. So that's kind of the question. Is like, we're supposed to be happy, but in that happiness, are we sad? It's kind of forcing that happiness. Carlyle's, back to the article here. Carlyle's sometime friend and longtime rival, the philosopher John Stuart Mill, came to a similar conclusion. His words are all the more worth listening to. His words are all the more worth heeding for the greater number. Oh, excuse me, I got this one. Let me fold it back. This is embarrassing. Hey, it's new. We're all trying to figure this whole distance learning thing out. Am I right? Me too. All right. Let me start that paragraph over again. Carlyle's sometimes friend and longtime rival, the philosopher John Stuart Mill, came to a similar conclusion. His words are all the more worth heeding in that Mill himself was a determined proponent of the greatest happiness for the greatest number. So he wants the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. And he says, ask yourself whether you are happy, and you cease to be so. Mill concluded after recovering from a serious bout of depression. Rather than resign himself to gloom, however, Mill vowed instead to look for happiness in another way. So this is an interesting quote. As a reader, I think, whoa, let me look at this quote again. Ask yourself whether you are happy, and you cease to be so. So he's saying, once we ask ourselves, once I sit back and say, Mr. Frankina, let's see, is Mr. Frankina happy? Well, I'm no longer happy. According to him, that's his idea. Is once you sit back and you decide to ask yourself, am I happy? That's when you're no longer happy. Right? That's according to the quote, right? And that's an interesting quote. And looking back at it, it says it's because he recovered from some depression. He had an issue with depression, and then this was his idea, and he felt better about it by thinking this way. And that's good for him. A little side note, just to kind of go off this a little bit, though, not everybody can recover depression just by thinking that they're happy. Okay. And so I don't like that part of this article. And it kind of expresses that, hey, this guy was depressed, and hey, he looked at it from a different point of view, and hey, he's no longer depressed. Doesn't always work that way. All right. And there are other reasons for depression and other avenues to help it than just thinking you're better. Right. It doesn't always work that way. It's one little part of this article that I don't like how it expresses that. But that's what happened for him, and it could happen for somebody. Okay. Some people that does happen for, and some other people it doesn't. And so once again, he says, once you ask yourself if you're happy, you cease to be so, you no longer are. So he continues here with the article. Those only are happy, he came to believe, who have their minds fixed on some object other than their own happiness, on the happiness of others, on the improvement of mankind, even on some art or pursuit, followed not as a means, but as itself an ideal end. Aiming thus at something else, they find happiness by the way. For our own culture, steeped as it is in the relentless pursuit of personal pleasure and endless cheer, that message is worth heeding. So instead of asking yourself, am I happy? Trying to find happiness in yourself, he says we become happy by helping others, by doing other things besides focusing on our own personal happiness. We try to focus on other people's happiness and helping others and doing things for others. And he says, according to him, that's how we find happiness. And so finishing up the article, So in these last days of 2005, yes, it's sort of an old article, but I think the ideas still are important. So in these last days of 2005, I say to you, don't have a happy new year. Have dinner with your family or walk in the park with friends. If you're so inclined, put in some good hours at the office or at your favorite charity, temple, or church. Work on your jump shot or your child's model trains. With luck, you'll find happiness by the by. If not, your time won't be wasted. You may even bring a little joy to the world. And so that's an interesting thought, is don't have a happy new year. That means don't force it. And he doesn't want to force it upon us. But go do something you like. Go, maybe you want to spend some more time at the office doing some more work. Maybe you do want to go build some trains with your kid. Maybe you do want to go and help a charity. Whatever it is, he says, even if that doesn't make you happy, doing things for others, even if you don't find happiness, you've still made other people happy, right? And so that's an interesting idea. The article's title itself, In the Pursuit of Unhappiness. Are we actually finding unhappiness while we find happiness? Is really what he's kind of taking a look at. And the idea that you can't force it, and he doesn't want to force it upon us. So yeah, the ideas in this article are a little bit strange because they're focusing on the unhappiness of happiness. The unhappiness of happiness. That's an interesting little thought there. He's focusing on the unhappiness of being happy, and maybe the happiness of being unhappy. It's a weird idea, but it's something to kind of think about. And that's kind of what I wanted to do, is just read it a little bit here and give you an idea of the things that I would think as sort of analyzing it and taking a look at the quotes and trying to understand it a little bit better. And so hopefully that helped you understand it a little bit better. Again, that's kind of something I would like to do in the classroom. Kind of, I could read, pause, we could reflect together, but we can't, and this is where we are. So thank you for taking the time to watch this whole video. I know it was a little bit lengthy, but it's important to understanding that article that we're going to continue to work with. All right, so you guys have a great day, and don't be happy. Don't have a happy day. No, I really want you to be happy though.